Cat Oriel with Forbes Breaking News. Today I'm with Rep. David Schweikert of Arizona. Congressman, thank you so much for joining me again today.
And thank you for having me.
Of course. So, I just want to jump right in. You're a member of the Israel Allies Caucus. So I want to know, what was your reaction when you found out about the Hamas attack on Israel last week?
Have you ever had a moment where you're hearing a story and you almost have to go back and vet it? It's parts of what you're hearing are so horrific. Oh, that can't be true.
Right.
Oh, that's got to be from an internet troll. And you kept learning that the very things you were almost disharmonious to your belief system were becoming true. It took me almost a day, I think, to process the scale of the destruction of almost the evil. Because in your head, you're almost realizing that the ISIS type of mentality of brutality had just crossed into Israel.
So then once it sunk in and the U.S. had to step in, take action, how have you felt about the response so far and what Congress and Biden have done in response to the attack?
In many ways, I've been very pleased that Congress has stayed fairly harmonious in its discussions. I mean, obviously, we have some outliers, but that's for our brothers and sisters, mostly on the left, to have to deal with. But it also shined a light on when you have a lack of a speaker, the lack of the ability to bring something to the floor, quickly responsive. How do you communicate to the world that there are some things where even in a divided Congress, divided government, you can speak with one voice? And right now, at least for those who is in the House, we're voiceless because we don't have the speaker's slot filled.
Yeah, and also today, and as you said, without a Speaker of the House, all legislative business is paused. And I know that you are a big supporter of Israel and sending additional aid to Israel. So can you tell me a little bit about your legislation that you've introduced, and how not having a House Speaker is affecting your ability to get that passed?
Okay, and look, there's a little bit more complication to this. We've been doing some research in regards to obligations to with NATO, promises made to Ukraine, and how do you cover these financing obligations, and at the same time with some of the budgetary stresses we have in the United States. And have you ever had one of those where you have a faint recollection of something that happened years ago? Well, apparently during the first Gulf War, 9/11 terrorists, Treasury, Congress had developed some mechanisms to capture functionally garnished accounts and convert them into pay-fors. And that's why we were able to produce this legislation so quickly, because the staff had been working on this for a while. And so the idea is, Iran, we know, provides weapons, logistical support, all sorts of other things in the hierarchy of just their dystopian view of the world. But they're also stunning amounts of money that are functionally on frozen accounts throughout the Western world. My legislation is to try to capture those resources. Israel is going to have a number of obligations for rebuilding, for rearmament, paying for medical treatments for soldiers and families. And so it was a way of coming up with another stream of cash flow, but also using one of the bad actors' money to pay for it.
And so how has not having a speaker in the House prevented you from moving forward on the bill?
Absolutely frustrating. The neat thing is, we have bipartisan support. It's the type of thing that, whether it be my actual language or we, communally come together and craft a bill around my language, it's the type of thing it could have moved through this Congress in days. And here we are a couple of weeks later, and we're still frozen. So there's a frustration because, there's almost this cheerleading of we need to do something, but we're not capable of doing it because of a self-inflicted wound.
Mhm. So what is the feedback that you're getting? You mentioned that there is some support. Have you been getting support from all Republicans, or do you find that there is a fraction of the Republican Party that are not supporting sending additional aid to Israel?
No, actually, in this case, it's at least for our legislation, it's been fairly universal, and it's also been bipartisan. And even that, what do you call that place up the street? Oh yeah, the Senate. Um, sorry, if you can't make fun of the Senate, why be in Congress? We've actually picked up a handful of senators who are either taking our language or trying to craft around it. So it's actually been very helpful. We had the base research already done. So I'm actually feeling fairly positive about that. Now we just have to get it moving.
And then, so is there anything else that you would like to see from the executive branch? President Biden is going to Israel tomorrow. Are you supportive of his trip? Do you feel like he should have gone sooner? Secretary of
No.
State Antony Blinken's been there already. So talk to me a little bit about how you feel like the Biden administration's been doing.
It is absolutely appropriate that the president is going. Timing is it would be unworthy of us to be second guessing that. That just would be a little over the top. There are moments where the symbolism of the United States, the Western world, speaking in a common voice, has the ability to dampen down other bad actors. It is important that he go. It is also important that those of us in the partisan divide speak with a common voice and a common tone and a common purpose. And so I'm absolutely supportive of the president going.
And so let's talk a little bit about the other big news that's going on. Of course, today you are expected to vote on a new speaker. What do you think is going to happen? And what have your thoughts been for the past few weeks with all the speaker chaos in the conference that began with the motion to vacate McCarthy?
We were making progress. It's hard for me to sort of explain this, but policy doesn't care about your feelings. And every time I explain this, it hurts someone's feelings, which is lunacy. We were making progress budgetarily on so many policy sets. And this is tough. Remember, we control the House by just a handful of votes. We don't control the Senate. We don't control the White House, but we were finding some ways to move policy. And then 2 weeks ago, we blow ourselves up with 8 folks voting with all the Democrats to remove Speaker McCarthy, and everything's frozen. So now you've gone 2 weeks with no budget documents moving, where bad things have happened in the world, and we cannot speak with the common voice of a functioning government. This is what happens when people, in many ways, lead with their feelings instead of a calculator.
And so what do you think will happen today? Do you think that Jim Jordan will have the votes to become the speaker, and do you support him?
Yeah. I'm going to be somewhat unique from the standpoint of Jim's a personal friend. So for me, this is as much policy as also someone who is a friend. I think Jim gets underestimated because he does have one skill set. He knows what he knows and doesn't, and accepts what he doesn't know. So I do financial, I do Medicare finance, I do trade, I do taxes, I do ways and means, economic stuff. Chairman Jordan does oversight and judiciary. And his office has always been very good when they want an explanation of something that's moving in the debt markets, those things calling us. And we do the same when we're not understanding something. The world's complex. Congress has 435 members, and we all specialize in different things. Building a speakership that understands what they're good at and who to reach out to for others, that's where I'm hopeful. But we'll know as we're doing this recording, an hour and a half from now, whether the votes are on the floor. If they're not, I'm actually not sure which direction we go. It was a mistake to remove Speaker McCarthy. I hope those folks who cheered it on now 2 weeks later can look back and say, okay, their emotions led them. Now, hopefully their intellect helps them understand it was a stupid thing to do. Now we have to put the pieces back together.
Do you think there's any way that Speaker McCarthy comes back if Jim Jordan fails to pass the vote today?
There is a model where that could happen.
And then finally, I do have to ask, I'm not sure if you've seen it go a bit viral on Twitter, but your fellow House lawmaker, Rep. Democrat Brad Sherman, did tell my colleague Brittany Lewis on an episode of Forbes Newsroom yesterday that maybe former President George W. Bush could become the next speaker. Any response to that?
Yeah, I find there's personal reason I find much of what travels on social media to be sort of entertainment and not actually sort of fact-based. Look, you have a lot of members now who've sort of been trained to say outlandish things, and they get clicks or tweets or whatever the proper term is these days. But it's not actually serious proposals or policy making.
So former President George W. Bush would not have your vote on the House floor.
No, it's just not. I mean,
yeah,
well, we could also make up all sorts of other things. At some point, we need to actually be doing the work that's in front of us and not living in a fantasy world.
Definitely. Just wanted to get your response to that since you talked about it on our show. Well, thank you so much. Is there anything else that we didn't get to touch on about the speaker vote, Israel, anything else regarding your legislation that you'd like to add?
Yeah, look, there's lots of things going on around us. And I mean, think of this. Just the movement in interest rates today will be about $8.7 billion of additional interest this year. I'm not sure a lot of my brothers and sisters in Congress and the media understand the fragility of US finances right now. And having a dysfunctional speakership and with the angst that's in the world, we really have to get back to work.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.